Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. My parents tried to declare me unfit for refusing to fund my sister. The day my own parents served me court papers claiming I was mentally unfit was all because I refused to fund my sister's new boutique. I realized something brutal. Family loyalty has limits. Madhya. For years, I bent over backward trying to be the good daughter. But when I finally said no, they didn't just turn their backs on me. They tried to erase me. Have you ever had someone you love cross a line you never thought they would? Tell me in the comments. I'm listening, and I know I'm not alone. They didn't come to my Thanksgiving dinner for the turkey. They came for the ambush. I should have known better the minute they walked in, all smiles and hugs. I could feel the tension, the kind of tension that only family can create. There was no happy Thanksgiving in the air. Just the unspoken understanding that this wasn't going to be a pleasant evening. I've never been fond of the holiday. It's not the food. I can handle the turkey, the stuffing, and the mashed potatoes. But there's one thing I can't stand: pecan pie. And yet, every year my mom, Eleanor, insists on baking it as if it's some sort of tradition we can't break. I've never understood why she has such a fixation on it. Maybe it's her way of proving she can do everything. Mother, homemaker, and perfectionist. She's always made sure I knew she was in control of everything, including the Thanksgiving dinner. That year, though, the smell of the pie mingling with the Macy's parade on TV wasn't enough to distract me. I'd been preparing for the inevitable, and it didn't take long for my parents to spring it on me. As they settled into their seats at the small table in my modest Charlotte apartment, my sister Samantha started the conversation, as she always did, with a casual comment about her latest project. She had this way of sneaking in the most uncomfortable topics with an air of indifference, as if she was trying to bait me into reacting. I'm thinking about opening an eco-boutique downtown, Samantha said, swirling her wine glass as though she hadn't just dropped a bombshell. You know, something trendy, organic, all that good stuff. It's perfect for the times. I could feel my parents' eyes on me the moment the words left her lips. Samantha's sudden business venture wasn't as spontaneous as she made it sound. I could see the gears turning in my mom's head, the subtle look she gave Thomas, her way of preparing him for what was to come. I kept my response neutral. That sounds nice. But I knew what was coming next. You know, Maddie, Eleanor started, her voice dripping with that familiar sweetness that usually masks something else. It would be a great opportunity if you could help your sister out. Family loyalty is important, don't you think? She shot a look toward Thomas, who nodded his approval. Thomas, my dad, sat back in his chair, arms crossed, as if this was just another conversation they had planned for the evening. It's just a small investment, he added casually. Nothing to. It's about supporting your family. Samantha wasn't even looking at me. She was staring at her phone, scrolling absent-mindedly. But I noticed the faint smirk on her face, the same one she always wore when she knew she had me cornered, when she could manipulate me without saying a word. My heart sank. I could feel the familiar pull, the guilt, the pressure, the expectation. I can't, I said, the words hanging in the air like a heavy fog. The room fell into an eerie silence. I wasn't sure if I was expecting a different reaction, but the moment I said it, it felt like the walls closed in. Samantha's smirk faded, and for the first time she actually looked up. But instead of the warmth you'd expect from family, her expression was hard, disappointed almost. Eleanor's smile wavered as she placed her hands on the table, leaning forward. You'll regret being so selfish, Maddie. Her words hung there, sharper than any knife on the table. It wasn't just a threat. It was a statement of finality. For a moment I felt a flicker of doubt. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I should have helped just this once. But I held my ground. I watched as Eleanor gathered her things, her movement stiff, calculated. Thomas followed suit, and within minutes they were gone, leaving the leftovers behind like a cruel reminder of what just transpired. I stood in the quiet of my apartment, the Macy's parade still playing faintly in the background, feeling numb. I should have been used to it by now, the endless expectations, the constant tug-of-war between family loyalty and my own boundaries. I scraped the cold turkey into the trash, not caring anymore about the meal, the tradition, or the people who had just walked out. Just as I was about to clean up, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from Eleanor. Family always finds a way. The weight of her words settled over me as I stared at the screen, wondering what they meant. Would I regret saying no? Would they find a way to make me regret it, to make me pay for my selfishness? I didn't know, but one thing was certain. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. You never expect betrayal to come with official stationery. At first, it was just another rushed December morning. Charlotte had that sharp chill in the air, the kind that cut through your coat and made you wish you'd stayed home. Curled up with a book and a cup of coffee, I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the firm, my arms full of client files, and tried to shake off the nagging feeling that had been sitting on my chest since Thanksgiving. Work had always been my safe place. Numbers didn't lie, spreadsheets didn't twist themselves into guilt trips. Yet today, even the steady hum of keyboards and the click of polished shoes on tile couldn't settle me. Christmas decorations were everywhere. Plastic holly strung along the front desk, a battered Santa figurine guarding the coffee machine. Someone had set a holiday playlist on low volume. Bing Crosby crooned from unseen speakers, singing about being home. For Christmas, I could almost laugh at how wrong it felt. Home wasn't a place you returned to. Sometimes it was the place you ran from. I was halfway through updating a quarterly report when a man in a gray suit and a clipboard tapped on my cubicle wall. "Madeline Carter?" he asked, voice low but carrying. I nodded, feeling my stomach tighten. "You've been served," he said, handing me a thick envelope before disappearing as quickly as he'd appeared. For a moment I just stared at it, my name printed neatly across the front, the seal of the court at the top corner. A few of my coworkers nearby tried not to look but failed miserably, their curiosity prickling the air like static. I stood up, papers trembling slightly in my hands, and walked to the break room like a woman on autopilot. Ryan was there already, pouring himself a second or maybe third cup of coffee. "Hey," he said, looking up. His smile faltered when he saw my face. "You okay?" I shook my head, too numb to find words. I slid into the corner booth and tore open the envelope with trembling fingers. Conservatorship. The word hit me like a slap. My parents had filed to take legal control over my life, claiming I was mentally unstable and incapable of managing my own affairs. The documents laid it out in sterile legal jargon. Allegations of erratic behavior, irresponsible financial decisions, emotional instability. It was all lies, all of it. The room spun slightly. I gripped the table edge to ground myself, focusing on the smoothness of the laminate under my palms. Somewhere behind me, Bing kept singing about snow and mistletoe. Ryan sat down across from me, setting his coffee aside. "Talk to me, Maddie. What's going on?" I pushed the papers across the table toward him. He read quickly, his eyes darkening. "This is insane," he said, voice tight. "You're one of the most together people I know." I gave a small hollow laugh. Not according to them. The old guilt surfaced again, unbidden. I remembered sitting in the financial aid office my sophomore year of college, wiring part of my tuition money to Samantha because she begged me to help cover her unpaid fees. She never paid me back. Worse, when I asked about it later, she cried and told Mom I was being selfish. I ended up apologizing. That had been the pattern my whole life. Samantha stumbled, I caught her. Samantha lied, I covered. Samantha broke things, I paid. And now they were accusing me of being unstable. "I should have seen it coming," I whispered. Ryan leaned forward. "This isn't your fault." The break room felt too small, the fluorescent lights too harsh. I shoved the papers back into the envelope and stood up. "I need to get out of here." "Take the rest of the day," Ryan said immediately. "I'll cover for you." I nodded, grateful but barely processing. I grabbed my coat, barely remembering to clock out before slipping into the icy wind outside. My apartment felt different when I walked in, like it had shrunk in my absence. The small Christmas tree I'd put up in the corner seemed almost mocking now, its twinkling lights, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I dropped the envelope onto the coffee table and sat on the couch, staring at it. I reread the documents once, twice. By the third time, the words blurred together and I had to blink back tears. They weren't trying to help me, they were trying to erase me. The realization settled into my bones, cold and heavy. It wasn't about concern. It wasn't about love. It was about control, about money, about keeping me where they thought I belonged, under their thumb, silent, compliant. Somewhere in the background, the Christmas playlist looped to another song. The irony of joy to the world playing while my own world cracked apart wasn't lost on me. I stayed there all night, curled on the couch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders like armor, the envelope lying open on the table like a wound that wouldn't close. Around 4 in the morning, just as the first hints of dawn touched the skyline outside my window, I made a decision. They taught me to survive them. Now I'll survive this. Sometimes your best hope comes from the family they tried to erase. It was Ryan who found me after a restless night spent flipping through old photo albums and court documents until my eyes ached. I had called him at dawn. He didn't ask questions. He just came over with coffee and a look that told me he wasn't letting me do this alone. We sat on my living room floor, laptops open, the Christmas lights from my tiny tree casting a soft, uncertain glow across the room. "You sure about this?" Ryan asked, scrolling through online listings. "I'm not sure about anything," I admitted. "But I can't fight them alone. And Maggie, she might be the only one who understands." Maggie Reeves, the family ghost. When I was a child, Maggie had been a whispered warning. "Don't end up like her." Eleanor would hiss when I dared to question a rule or ask too many uncomfortable questions. She was the aunt who had messed everything up, though no one ever explained exactly how. But I remembered one thing. When I turned 8, Maggie had sent me a real birthday card. Not the pre-printed, pre-signed kind, but one with a handwritten note telling me I was smart and brave and deserved to chase my dreams. Eleanor had thrown it away before I finished reading it. Now I wondered what other truths Maggie might have tried to send me. Ryan tapped his screen. "Maggie Reeves, Family Law, Uptown Charlotte, Small Practice." He glanced at me. "You ready?" "No," I said honestly, grabbing my coat. "But let's go anyway." The rain had started by the time we reached the narrow brick building tucked between a dentist's office and a second-hand bookstore. The streets gleamed under the gray sky, puddles rippling with every passing car. I stared up at the faded brass plaque on the door. "Reeves and Associates, Family Law and Estate Planning." My hand hovered at the door. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back. After all, hadn't I been taught my whole life that reaching out, asking for help was weakness? But another voice, quieter but stronger, said, "This is survival." I pushed the door open. Inside, the air smelled of old books, leather, and something warm I couldn't quite name, comfort, maybe. The receptionist, a woman about my age with curly hair and sharp eyes, looked up from her screen. "Can I help you?" I'm looking for Maggie Reeves," I said, my voice sounding too small. "I don't have an appointment." The woman studied me for a moment longer than necessary. Then she picked up the phone, murmured something, and gestured to a worn leather couch against the wall. "Wait here, please." I sat, my hands twisting in my lap, staring at the framed photographs lining the walls. Families smiling awkwardly at weddings, reunions, adoptions, moments of hope frozen in time. Minutes later, a door creaked open down the hall. "Maggie!" The voice was deeper than I remembered, more lined with time, but unmistakably familiar. I looked up. Maggie stood there in a navy pantsuit, her silver hair pulled back into a no-nonsense bun. She had the same piercing eyes I saw in the mirror sometimes, the ones that could strip lies down to the bone. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply opened the door wider. "Come in." I followed her into a small, cluttered office that smelled even more strongly of leather and ink, and something that felt like truth. She motioned for me to sit, then lowered herself into the chair behind the desk, studying me like she was memorizing every scar I carried. "I'm sorry to show up like this," I began, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. Maggie waved a hand. "If you're here, it means something's wrong. And if it involves Eleanor, it's probably worse than you think." That almost broke me right there. Hearing someone say it out loud without judgment or disbelief. I took a deep breath and pulled the crumpled court papers from my bag, laying them between us like a peace offering. Maggie read silently, her eyes narrowing with every line. By the time she finished, her knuckles were white where they gripped the pages. "Conservatorship," she said, voice low and furious. "They're trying to declare you incompetent." I nodded because I wouldn't give Samantha money for her new boutique. Maggie leaned back, folding her arms. Same old story, different decade. She glanced at a picture frame on her desk, an old black and white photo of a woman I didn't recognize, standing proudly next to a dilapidated farmhouse. "They did the same thing to me," Maggie said quietly. When our father died, I fought Eleanor and Thomas over the will. I wanted things split fairly, they wanted control. So they called me unstable, rebellious, dangerous. I swallowed hard. I didn't know, of course, she said with a humorless smile. They erased me easier that way. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The rain drummed steadily against the window. Then Maggie leaned forward, her eyes burning into mine. If we fight, she said, voice steel wrapped in velvet, we fight smart and we don't miss. My throat closed up. I nodded once fiercely. I sat back studying me. Do you have proof? My hands trembled as I reached into my bag again, pulling out the small flash drive I had tucked into the inner pocket the night before. I set it on the desk between us. I have years of it, I said. Texts, emails, voicemails, bank statements, everything they thought I was too scared to keep. Maggie's eyes gleamed, and for the first time, I saw something like pride flicker across her face. She reached out and closed her fingers gently over the flash drive. Good, she said. Very good. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside that small office, I felt something shift. For the first time in weeks, maybe even years, I wasn't alone. And that, I realized, was the thing they had underestimated the most. I wasn't the little girl they could corner in silence anymore. I had a voice, and with Maggie beside me, I was going to use it. In war, the first step isn't attack. It's gathering your arsenal. The snow had started falling the night we decided to fight back. Not the thick storybook kind, but fine, restless flakes that whispered against the windows of Maggie's office, barely sticking to the sidewalks. It made everything outside look a little hazy, a little unreal, like we were trapped inside a snow globe shaken just a little too hard. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of strong coffee and old paper. Files were spread across every surface, desk, chairs, even the floor. Post-it notes fluttered under the draft from the heater, tiny yellow flags marking battles still to be fought. I sat cross-legged on the rug, laptop balanced precariously on my knees, while Maggie paced behind her desk, flipping through documents with the intensity of a general planning a siege. You have to think like them, she said. If they accuse you of being unstable, what's their evidence and how do we destroy it? The words made me flinch, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. I thought back to all the times I had hidden my report cards, terrified Eleanor would find a B+ and declare me a failure, unstable, a disappointment. It had always been easier to pretend everything was perfect, but pretending hadn't saved me. I took a deep breath and pulled open another folder. Ryan showed up not long after, arms full of takeout containers and a look that said he wasn't planning on leaving anytime soon. He dropped the food on the side table and grabbed his laptop, setting it up next to mine. All right, he said, cracking his knuckles. Let's dig in. We worked in silence for hours, broken only by the occasional muttered curse when one of us uncovered another damning piece of evidence. Screenshots of texts where Eleanor belittled me, emails where Samantha hinted I owed her for everything the family did for me, bank records showing odd transfers from my parents' accounts straight into ones Samantha controlled. At one point, Ryan paused, squinting at his screen. Hey, Maddie, he said, voice cautious. You need to see this. I scooted over, peering at the email he had pulled up. Dated Christmas 2020, right after I had gotten my year-end bonus at work. Subject: Family priorities from Eleanor Carter to Mattline Carter. Maddie, we all make sacrifices for the people we love. It would be best if you put your bonus toward helping Samantha settle her debts. After all, without family, what are we? The words coiled in my gut like a snake. I remembered that Christmas clearly, the way Eleanor had smiled at me over dinner, so warm, so proud. How foolish I had felt, thinking just for a moment that I was finally enough. Ryan leaned back in his chair. They've been planning this for a long time. I nodded, swallowing against the lump rising in my throat. They never really wanted me to succeed. They just wanted me to succeed enough to save Samantha. Maggie didn't say anything. She just kept reading, her face carved from stone. By midnight, we had organized everything into folders. Digital evidence, financial abuse, emotional manipulation. Each file was a brick in the wall we were building to protect me. Maggie drafted a counter-motion against the conservatorship, typing with the furious precision of someone who had been preparing for this fight her entire life. They accuse you of being unstable, she said. Fine, we show the court that what you really are is inconvenient. Outside, the snow thickened, swirling under the streetlights in slow, hypnotic spirals. I watched it for a moment, feeling oddly calm. Maybe this was what battlefields always felt like before the first shot. A strange, almost reverent stillness. Then Maggie froze. She was holding a file I didn't recognize. Something she must have pulled from the court records Eleanor had submitted. Slowly, she laid it open on the desk. "What's this?" I asked, standing up and walking over. It was my birth certificate, except not exactly. The name listed for my mother was right, Eleanor Carter. But the father's name was not Thomas Carter. Instead, it was a different name entirely, hastily crossed out and replaced in lighter ink. Maggie's finger tapped the margin. "This isn't just a clerical error," she said. "This was altered illegally." I stared at the document, heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the hum of the heater. "What does it mean?" "It means," Maggie said slowly, "that if we can prove you aren't Thomas Carter's biological daughter, they have no legal right to your finances. None." Ryan whistled low. "That changes everything." Maggie closed the file slowly, almost reverently. "They didn't just try to erase you," she said, her voice like a funeral bell. "They tried to own you." The room seemed to shrink around me, the walls pressing closer, the snow falling faster outside. But inside, for the first time in a long time, something inside me stood up straight. If they had built their empire on lies, I was ready to tear it down, brick by stolen brick. Courtrooms don't heal wounds, they just expose them. The morning air was sharp enough to slice through wool. I wrapped my scarf tighter around my neck as we walked up the courthouse steps, my boots clicking too loud. Dully against the slick concrete overhead, the sky sagged low and gray as if it wanted to press us all into the ground. Inside, the Mecklenburg County Courthouse smelled like cheap coffee, paper dust, and the faint metallic tang of nerves. It was a battlefield without swords, only paper and truth, and sometimes lies sharpened. Just as crewy, Maggie moved with purpose, her heels striking deliberate rhythms down the hallway. I followed her, trying to ignore how my hands trembled despite the gloves. Ryan and Chloe trailed behind, quiet, steady presences anchoring me to the moment. When we entered the courtroom, they were already there. Eleanor in a bright red coat that screamed defiance, Thomas rumpled in gray, his eyes darting anywhere but toward me, Samantha lounging like it was a brunch date, not a legal proceeding that could upend all our lives. I sat down at the defendant's table, feeling the wood cool and solid under my palms. Maggie leaned close. "Stay calm, let them hang themselves," she murmured. I nodded once. The judge entered, a woman with sharp eyes and a mouth that rarely hinted at a smile. We all stood, then sat at her command. Their lawyer, a smooth-talking man named Gregory Kane, stood first. "Your Honor," he began, voice syrupy, "this is not an attack on Miss Carter, it is an act of love. Her family is deeply concerned for her well-being." I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste blood. Gregory called Eleanor to the stand. She moved like she was floating, all maternal concern and righteous grief. "We notice changes," she said, voice trembling, artfully withdrawn behavior, financial irresponsibility, emotional outbursts. I stared at her hands as she clutched the Bible during her oath. They didn't even shake. She recounted tearfully how I once forgot to call her back during a family crisis, how I refused to co-sign a loan for Samantha, how I missed Thanksgiving dinner. Never mind that it was because they tried to corner me for money. Each story was a sliver of truth twisted into a dagger aimed at my heart. Thomas followed, mumbling through vague concerns about my emotional fragility. Samantha offered a dramatic sigh, painting me as bitter, jealous, unstable. I kept my face still, my hands folded in my lap. When Gregory rested their case, Maggie rose, calm as a gathering storm. She called Chloe to the stand. Chloe walked straight back, chin high. Under oath, her words were crisp, steady. "I worked with Samantha Carter for 2 years," she said. "She constantly bragged about how Maddie paid her debts. When Maddie stopped, Samantha said she'd find another way to get the money." Gregory objected, claiming hearsay. Overruled, Chloe continued, her voice slicing through the courtroom. "I also heard Eleanor Carter tell Samantha, 'Maddie owes us after everything we sacrificed.'" The judge's eyebrows knit together. She leaned forward slightly. Then Maggie brought out the records. Financial statements showing Eleanor and Thomas transferring funds into Samantha's account. Texts where Eleanor implied I was overly dramatic for refusing to hand over my bonuses. Emails pressuring me to co-sign loans I'd never even agreed to discuss. Piece by piece, the careful facade they built crumbled. Finally, Maggie called me to the stand. The courtroom blurred for a moment as I stood, every nerve screaming to run. I flashed back to high school, standing frozen during a speech competition after Eleanor hissed that my voice was too dramatic and embarrassing. But this time I steadied myself. This time my voice didn't tremble. "I am not unstable," I said. "I have held a steady job for over a decade. I manage my finances. I own my choices." I paused, meeting the judge's eyes. "What I have not managed," I said, voice low but clear, "is the constant gaslighting, manipulation, and financial pressure from my family. Their concern isn't for my well-being. It's for their control over my life." A silence stretched thick and buzzing. Maggie approached the bench with a final exhibit, the altered birth certificate and trust documents. "Your Honor," she said, placing them carefully before the judge, "we have evidence that Maddie Carter's birth record was illegally modified to bind her financially to the Carter Family Trust, a trust she had no rightful claim to, yet was used as leverage against her for decades." The judge's face hardened. She flipped through the documents, lips pressed into a thin line. "This court finds sufficient cause to open an independent investigation into the Carter family's financial dealings," she announced, effective immediately. I exhaled shakily. The sound felt louder than the gavel when it came down. Court adjourned for now. The hallway outside was a blur of coats and angry whispers. I made it halfway to the exit when I felt Eleanor's hand clamp around my wrist. "You'll regret crossing blood," she hissed, her breath hot against my ear. I turned slowly, prying her fingers from my coat with deliberate calm. "I'm not yours to bleed dry anymore," I said. She recoiled like I'd slapped her. And for the first time in my life I didn't flinch. Freedom doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like standing very still and realizing the storm has passed. The courthouse smelled cleaner that day, like someone had cracked a window and let spring blow in. Outside, cherry blossoms were just beginning to unfurl along the sidewalks, tiny bursts of pink against the stubborn gray of the stone buildings. I stood in front of the judge's bench, my hands steady at my sides. Maggie stood to my right, calm and unflinching. Ryan was somewhere in the gallery, pretending not to look proud. The judge read the final ruling in a voice clipped and decisive. "The conservatorship petition is formally dismissed with prejudice. Financial sanctions are levied against Eleanor and Samantha Carter for their misconduct. The respondent, Madeline Carter, is free to pursue independent legal action if she chooses." A pause, a glance at me, and upon request, the court grants the petition for a legal name change. Madeline Carter shall henceforth be known as Melline Reeves. I didn't move for a beat. I just let the words settle into my bones like sunlight after a long, brutal winter. Maggie nudged me gently. I stepped forward, signed the documents with a hand that didn't even tremble, and felt the final chain break. Not with rage but with peace. Reeves, a name I chose, a name built not from obligation, guilt, or bloodlines, but from the quiet resilience of someone who refused to disappear. As we exited the courtroom, I caught a glimpse of Eleanor and Samantha standing off to the side, their faces unreadable. Samantha fiddled with the strap of a purse I knew she couldn't afford without someone else footing the bill. Eleanor's mouth was set in a tight, bitter line. For a moment Eleanor's eyes met mine. She took a step forward, hesitation flickering across her face. I turned away, not with anger, not even with sadness, just with the understanding that not every wound needs reopening. Outside, the city buzzed with the energy of a new season. Vendors were setting up stalls with fresh flowers, a busker played a bright tune on a battered saxophone, and somewhere nearby someone laughed. A sound so light it made my chest ache in the best way. Maggie clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Feels different, doesn't it?" I nodded, breathing in air that felt somehow sharper, cleaner. Ryan sidled up, holding 2 coffees and a pastry bag. "So when's the memoir coming out?" he teased. I laughed a real laugh, the kind that bubbled up without permission. "Give me a minute," I said. "I'm still getting used to writing my name." Maggie grinned. "Start with that. The rest will follow." Later that afternoon, I sat cross-legged on the floor of my new apartment. It was smaller than the last one but lighter, airier. There were no heavy drapes or dusty heirlooms weighing it down, just shelves waiting to be filled with books, walls waiting for pictures that meant something. I sifted through a final box from my old life. High school trophies no one had attended ceremonies for. Cards signed with obligatory love. A photo of me at 10 years old standing stiffly next to Ella Laner at some long-forgotten school play. One by one, I placed them in a donation pile. Not with bitterness, not with grief, just release. There were some memories worth keeping, but they lived inside me now, not in things. As the sun dipped low, casting long golden beams across the wooden floor, I tucked one last item into my bag. A small paper crane I had folded years ago during a lonely afternoon at summer camp. I carried it down to the little creek that ran behind my building, the water chuckling softly over smooth stones. Kneeling at the edge, I placed the crane on the surface. For a moment it floated weightless and sure. Then the current caught it, pulling it gently downstream. Not broken, just folded into something new. I stood up, brushing my hands off on my jeans. The city lights flickered to life around me, and for once they didn't feel like beacons I could never reach. They felt like invitations. Onto the bright, bustling street, no longer tethered to a past that never loved me the way it should have. I was free, anonymous, and exactly who I chose to be, Melina Reeves. The day my own parents served me court papers claiming I was mentally unfit, all because I refused to fund my sister's new boutique, I realized something brutal. Family loyalty has limits. Immadya. For years I bent over backward trying to be the good daughter, but when I finally said no, they didn't just turn their backs on me, they tried to erase me. Have you ever had someone you love cross a line you never thought they would?